The snow had been falling for 3 days without stopping. It was the worst winter storm Montana had seen in 50 years. The wind screamed through the mountains like an angry beast. Trees bent under the weight of ice. The temperature had dropped so low that even the wolves had gone silent. David Park sat alone in his cabin, watching the fire burn in the old stone fireplace. He was 62 years old, with gray hair and deep lines on his face. His hands were rough and scarred from decades of hard work and harder fighting. A cup of black coffee sat on the table beside him, growing cold because he had forgotten about it again. The cabin was small but strong. David had built most of it himself after he came back from the war. He wanted to be alone. He needed to be alone. The memories were too heavy to carry around other people. Every night, he still dreamed of fire and blood and the screams of dying soldiers. Every morning, he woke up reaching for a rifle that was no longer there. David had served in the Galactic Expansion Wars for 15 years. He had been a Marine, one of the best. He had fought on planets with names most people could not pronounce. He had killed more enemies than he could count. And he had watched his friends die, one by one, until he was the only one left from his original squad. The war had ended 12 years ago, but for David, it never really stopped. It lived inside him like a poison that would not leave his blood. He picked up his coffee and took a sip. It was cold and bitter, just like everything else in his life. That was when he heard the scratching dot at first. He thought it was a branch hitting the side of the cabin. The wind was strong enough to throw anything around. But then the scratching came again, and this time it was followed by a weak thumping sound. Something was hitting his front door. David set down his coffee and reached for the plasma rifle that hung on the wall. Old habits never died. He checked the charge and found it full. Then he walked slowly toward the door, his boots making no sound on the wooden floor. The scratching stopped. For a moment, there was only the howling of the wind. Then came a voice. It was weak and broken, barely louder than a whisper, but David heard it clearly through the door. Please, help, please. It was not a human voice. The words were shaped wrong, spoken by a mouth that was not designed for human language. David knew that sound. He had heard it many times during the war, usually right before he pulled the trigger. Valkyrie, the dragon people. The enemy. His finger tightened on the rifle. Every instinct told him to ignore the voice, to let the cold do what his bullets had done so many times before. The Valkyrie had killed thousands of humans during the war. They had burned entire colonies to ash. They had shown no mercy. Why should he? But then another sound came through the door. It was small and high and filled with pain. It was the sound of a child crying. David had heard many terrible things in his life. He had heard soldiers scream as they died. He had heard the roar of bombing runs and the thunder of orbital strikes. But nothing cut through him like the cry of a child in pain. He opened the door. The wind hit him like a wall of ice. Snow rushed into the cabin, covering his boots in seconds. But David barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on the 3 figures collapsed on his porch. They were Valkyrie, just as he had feared. But they looked nothing like the warriors he remembered from the war. These creatures were broken and dying. Their scales, which should have been deep red like fresh blood, had turned pale blue from the cold. Ice hung from their wings like chains. Their golden eyes were dull and desperate. The largest one was female. David could tell from the pattern of ridges on her skull and the shape of her horns. She was trying to shield the other 2 with her body, spreading her frozen wings over them like a blanket. Her claws were cracked and bleeding from scratching at his door. Beside her was a male, slightly smaller but with broader shoulders. 3 deep cuts ran across his chest, and dark blue blood had frozen around the wounds. He was barely conscious, his breath coming in short, painful gasps. And between them, pressed against the female's chest, was the child. She was tiny, no bigger than a large dog. Her scales were softer than the adults, more pink than red. Her wings were small and undeveloped. Her eyes were closed, and her whole body was shaking with cold and fear. The female Valkyrie lifted her head and looked at David. Her golden eyes met his brown ones. She saw the rifle in his hands. She saw the dog tags around his neck. She knew what he was. She knew what he had done. But she spoke anyway. "Please," she said, her voice cracking with cold and exhaustion. "Our ship crashed in the mountains. We walked for 2 days. Our daughter, she is dying. I beg you, I will give you anything. Just save her, please." David stared at them. His mind was screaming at him to close the door. These were Valkyrie, the enemy. He had spent 15 years learning how to kill them. He had buried friends because of them. He had sworn he would never forget what they had done. But the little one made that crying sound again. That small, helpless, universal sound that meant the same thing in every language in the galaxy. "I am scared. I'm cold. I want to live." David thought about the war. He thought about the blood and the fire and the death. He thought about all the reasons he had to hate the creatures lying on his porch. Then he thought about the empty cabin behind him, the cold coffee, the nightmares that came every night, the loneliness that ate at his soul like acid. He lowered his rifle. "Get inside," he said, his voice rough and hard. "All of you, now, before you freeze to death on my porch." The female Valkyrie stared at him with something like shock in her golden eyes. For a moment, she did not move. Perhaps she could not believe what she was hearing. "Now," David repeated. "I will not ask again." He reached down and grabbed the male by his arm, pulling him up with strength that surprised even himself. The male groaned in pain but did not resist. David dragged him inside and dropped him near the fire. The female followed, carrying the child against her chest. Her wings dragged on the floor, leaving trails of melting ice. She moved slowly, carefully, as if she expected David to change his mind and shoot her at any moment. David closed the door against the storm and turned to face his unexpected guests. 3 Valkyrie, sitting in his living room, dripping water onto his floor. 3 enemies, now dependent on his mercy. He had no idea what he was doing. He had no idea why he was doing it. But as he looked at the little one, still shaking in her mother's arms, he knew one thing for certain. He could not have left them to die. No matter what they were. No matter what their kind had done. Because if he had closed that door, he would have become something worse than any enemy he had ever faced. He would have become a monster. The cabin filled with strange smells as the ice melted from the Valkyrie bodies. It was a sharp, reptilian scent mixed with something like copper and burnt wood. David remembered that smell from the war. It had always meant danger. It had always meant death was close. But now it just meant 3 frozen aliens were dripping water all over his floor. David worked quickly. He did not think about what he was doing or why. He simply moved, following the instincts that had kept him alive through 15 years of combat. First, he needed heat. The little one was the coldest. Her scales had turned almost white, and her breathing was so shallow, he could barely see her chest move. He grabbed every blanket he owned and piled them near the fire. Then he pulled the space heater from his bedroom and set it as close to the pile as he could. The female Valkyrie watched him with wide golden eyes. She did not speak. She seemed afraid that any sound might break whatever spell had made this human help them. "Put her here," David said, pointing to the blankets. "She needs direct heat. Your kind cannot control body temperature when young, correct?" The female blinked in surprise. You know about us? I fought your people for 15 years. I learned things." His voice was flat and cold. Now put her down before she dies." The female moved quickly, laying her daughter on the pile of blankets. The little one whimpered, but did not wake. Her mother curled around her, spreading her wings to trap the heat. It was a gesture of pure protection, pure love. David had seen human mothers do the same thing during evacuations. He turned to the male. The 3 cuts on his chest were deep, reaching down to the dark blue muscle beneath the scales. The blood had stopped flowing, frozen by the cold, but now that he was warming up, it would start again. "You," David said. "Those wounds need treatment. Sit still." The male looked at him with something between suspicion and wonder. "You would heal me? After everything? I am not letting anyone die in my cabin. Sit still or bleed out. Your choice." David went to his storage closet and pulled out the old military medical kit. It was designed for humans, not Valkyrie, but the basic principles were the same. Clean the wound. Stop the bleeding. Prevent infection. He had done field surgery on 3 different species during the war. He could do this. The male sat rigid as David worked on his wounds. The antiseptic made him hiss in pain, and the stitches made his claws dig into the wooden floor. But he did not fight. He did not even complain. "My name is Kira," the female said quietly from her place by the fire. "This is my mate, Tomas. Our daughter is Luna." David did not look up from his work. "I did not ask. I know, but I wanted you to know that we have names. That we are not just monsters." David's hands stopped moving for just a moment. Then he continued stitching. "I never said you were monsters. You did not have to. I can smell the hate on you. The old blood. You have killed many of my kind. Yes, there was no point in lying. I have, and yet you help us." David finished the last stitch and sat back. Tomas's wounds were closed now, wrapped in clean bandages that looked strange against his red scales. The bleeding had stopped. He would live. "I do not understand humans," Kira said. "We were taught that your kind is brutal, savage, that you kill without mercy and feel no remorse. Your people were taught wrong." David stood and washed the blood from his hands. Or maybe they were taught what they needed to believe to keep fighting. He walked to the kitchen and opened his freezer. Inside was half a deer he had hunted last week. He did not know if Valkyrie could eat earth meat, but protein was protein. Their bodies needed fuel to heal. "Can your kind eat this?" he asked, holding up a frozen steak. Kira tilted her head, studying the meat. "We are carnivores. If it is flesh, we can eat it." David nodded and began cooking. The sound of sizzling meat filled the cabin, mixing with the crackle of the fire. It was strange, almost peaceful. 3 aliens sat in his living room while he cooked them dinner. If anyone had told him this would happen a week ago, he would have laughed in their face or shot them. "Why are you here?" David asked as he cooked. "Earth is deep in human space. Your people have not come to this sector since the war ended." Tomas and Kira exchanged a look. It was a look David recognized, the look of 2 people deciding how much truth to tell. "We are exiles," Tomas finally said. His English was rough, harder to understand than Kira's. "Our dominion sentenced us to death. For what crime?" Another look. Then Kira spoke, her voice quiet and sad. "For believing that the war was wrong. For teaching our people that humans are not animals to be hunted. For saying that peace is possible." David stopped cooking. He turned to look at them, really look at them, for the first time since they had entered his cabin. "You are telling me that your own people tried to kill you because you wanted peace with humans?" "Yes, that is." David shook his head. "That is insane, is it?" Kira's golden eyes were steady on his face. "Your people have laws against treason, do they not? Against those who give comfort to the enemy. That is different, is it?" We believed that humans deserved to live. That was our treason. David turned back to the stove. His hands were shaking slightly, though he did not know why. Perhaps it was anger. Perhaps it was something else. How many of you were there? He asked. How many believed as you do? 47 families. Almost 200 individuals, including children. Kira's voice broke slightly. The Dominions sent hunters to our colony. They killed everyone. We three are the only survivors. The cabin fell silent, except for the sizzling of meat and the howling of wind outside. David thought about 200 Velkari, killed by their own people for the crime of wanting peace. He thought about the colonies he had seen burned during the war, the human families destroyed by Velkari raiders. Maybe both sides had been wrong. Maybe both sides had been right. Maybe there was no good or evil in war, only survival and death. Here, David set a plate of cooked meat in front of Tomas. Eat. You need strength to heal. Tomas looked at the meat, then at David. You would share food with us? It is just food. No. Tomas shook his head slowly. Among my people, to share food is to share life. It means you trust someone to eat before you. It is the highest honor a host can give. David stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned back to the kitchen. I guess I'm honoring you. Now eat before it gets cold. He did not see the tears that formed in Kira's golden eyes. He did not see Tomas bow his head in gratitude. He did not see Luna stir slightly in her sleep, her color already returning to a healthy pink, but he felt something change in the cabin. Something small but important. For the first time in 12 years, David Park did not feel completely alone. 4 days passed. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside the cabin, something unexpected was happening. The ice between David and his guests was melting faster than the snow on their scales. Luna was the first to break through. Children, it seemed, did not care about wars or politics or the hatred between species. They only cared about warmth, food, and interesting things to explore. By the third day, Luna was strong enough to move around the cabin. She was curious about everything. She sniffed at David's books, poked at his cooking pots, and tried to chew on his boots until Kira stopped her with a sharp word in their native language. But what fascinated her most were David's dog tags. They hung on a hook near the door, 2 small pieces of metal on a chain. Luna would sit beneath them for hours, staring up at the way they caught the firelight. She has never seen metal worked so smoothly, Kira explained. On our world, only royalty can afford such craftsmanship. She thinks you must be a very important person. David snorted. Those tags are worth nothing. They just tell people who to notify when you die. Kira was quiet for a moment. Then they are worth everything. They mean someone cares enough to remember you. David had no answer for that. On the 4th evening, Luna finally gathered enough courage to approach David directly. He was sitting by the fire, cleaning his rifle out of habit more than necessity. Luna walked up to him on her short legs and stopped just out of arm's reach. Her golden eyes, so like her mother's, studied him with intense curiosity. You are a warrior, she said. Her English was surprisingly good for a child, though her voice had a strange musical quality that no human throat could produce. Yes, David said. A long time ago. Did you fight my people? David stopped cleaning his rifle. He looked at the little creature standing before him, so small and innocent, so unaware of the blood that stained his hands. Yes, he said quietly. I did. Did you kill them? Kira made a sharp sound, starting to rise, but David held up his hand. It is all right. She deserves the truth. He set down his rifle and looked Luna in the eyes. I killed many of your people, Luna. I was a soldier. That was my job. Luna tilted her head, thinking about this. Were you scared? Every single day. Are you scared now? David thought about it. Was he scared? He had 3 members of an enemy species living in his home. He had just admitted to a child that he had killed her kind. By all rights, he should be terrified, but he was not. "No," he said, "I'm not scared anymore." Luna smiled. It was a strange expression on a Valkyrie face, showing too many teeth, but David understood the meaning. She walked closer, close enough to touch, and looked up at his dog tags hanging by the door. "Can I see them?" David hesitated. Then he reached over and took the tags from the hook. He held them out to Luna, letting her examine them with her small claws. "What do the words mean?" she asked. "My name, David Park, my blood type, my religion, the name of the person to contact if I die. Who is that person?" David's throat tightened. "There is no one. Not anymore." Luna looked at him with those golden eyes that seemed to see too much. Then, very carefully, she placed the dog tags back in his hand and closed his fingers around them. "Now there is us," she said. David did not know what to say. His eyes burned, and he had to look away toward the fire. He had not cried in 20 years. He was not about to start now, but it was close. It was very close. That night, Thomas asked David to walk with him outside. The storm had finally died down, leaving the world covered in clean white snow. The moon was bright, making the landscape glow like something from a dream. Thomas walked slowly, his injuries still healing. His wings were folded against his back, and his breath came out in small clouds of steam. For a long time, neither of them spoke. "You saved our lives," Thomas finally said. "I need to understand why." David kicked at the snow. "I told you. I do not let people die in my cabin. That is not an answer. Many humans would have killed us on sight. You know what we are. You know what our kind did during the war. You have every reason to hate us. Maybe I am tired of hating." Thomas stopped walking and turned to face David. In the moonlight, his red scales looked almost black. His golden eyes gleamed like coins. "Among my people, there is a tradition. When someone saves your life, you owe them a life debt. It is the most sacred bond we have. I owe you 3 life debts now. 1 for myself, 1 for Kira, 1 for Luna. I do not want your debts. It does not matter what you want. The debt exists. It is part of our honor." Thomas placed his clawed hand over his heart. "From this day until my death, I am bound to you, David Park. Your enemies are my enemies. Your battles are my battles. Your home is my home." David stared at him. "That is a lot to promise to someone you just met. My people do not make promises lightly. That is why we keep them." Thomas paused, then added quietly, "That is also why we were sentenced to death. We promised to seek peace with humans, and we kept that promise even when it meant our destruction." They stood in the snow for a long moment, 2 warriors from opposite sides of a war that had killed millions. The moonlight made long shadows on the white ground. "There is something I need to tell you," David said. "About the war." Thomas waited. "There was a battle on a planet called Kepler 7. Your people had an outpost there. We were sent to destroy it." David's voice was flat, empty of emotion. "There were civilians in that outpost. Families, children. Our commanders said they were military targets. We followed orders." He looked at Thomas, waiting for the anger, the hatred, the violence that he deserved. "I know," Thomas said quietly. "I lost my brother in that attack." David felt the words like a knife in his gut. "And you still ask me for shelter?" "I did not ask you. Kira did. I was unconscious." Thomas's mouth twisted in something that might have been a smile. "But I would have asked too. Because holding on to hate is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. My brother is gone. Nothing I do to you will bring him back. How can you forgive so easily?" "I did not say I forgive you. I said I choose not to hate you." Those are different things. Tomas turned and began walking back toward the cabin. Forgiveness takes time, but hate takes everything. I have already lost too much to give it anything else. David stood alone in the snow for a long time after Thomas went inside. He thought about the war. He thought about the things he had done. He thought about the brother he had never known he had killed. And for the first time in his life, he understood that the enemy was never just an enemy. They were fathers and brothers and children and friends. They were people with lives and loves and dreams. They were just like him. When he finally went back inside, Luna was asleep by the fire, curled up in a nest of blankets. Kira and Tomas were speaking quietly in their own language, but they stopped when David entered. "I'm sorry," David said. "For your brother. For all of it." Tomas nodded slowly. "I'm sorry too. For your friends. For your peace. For the war that took so much from both of us. It was not forgiveness. It was not healing. But it was a start, and sometimes a start was all you needed." 7 days had passed since the storm began. The snow had finally stopped falling, and weak sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time in a week. David had started to believe that everything would be all right. He had started to believe that maybe, just maybe, the universe would leave them alone. He was wrong. It was late at night when the peace shattered. David was asleep in his chair by the fire, his rifle across his lap, as always. Luna was curled up on the blankets nearby, her small body rising and falling with peaceful breaths. Kira and Tomas were resting in the corner they had claimed as their own space. Then Luna screamed. It was not the cry of a child having a nightmare. It was a sound of pure terror, a high-pitched shriek that turned David's blood to ice. He was on his feet with his rifle raised before his eyes were fully open. Luna was pressed against the wall, her small wings spread wide, her golden eyes fixed on the window. Her whole body was shaking. Kira and Tomas were already awake, standing between their daughter and whatever she had seen. "What is it?" David demanded. Kira pointed at the window. Her face had gone pale, her scales losing their healthy color. "Look." David looked. Lights, dozens of them, descending through the night sky like falling stars. But they were not stars. They moved with purpose, with precision. They were ships. Small, fast, deadly ships that David recognized from 100 battles. Hunter ships. Valkyrie hunter ships. "They found us," Tomas said. His voice was calm, but David could see the fear in his eyes. "The Dominion sent hunters. They must have tracked our distress beacon. Can you turn it off?" "It died with our ship. But they already have our location. Turning it off would not matter now." David watched the lights descend toward the mountains. They would land within an hour, maybe less. Then the hunters would come. "How many in a hunter pack?" he asked. 12, usually. Sometimes more if the target is dangerous. Tomas's claws clenched. "We are not considered dangerous. We are traitors and cowards. They will send the minimum. 12. That is manageable." Kira stared at him. "Manageable?" "David, these are Dominion hunters. They are the best killers our species has ever produced. They have been trained since birth for one purpose: to find and destroy enemies of the state. I know what hunters are. I have killed them before. 1 or 2, maybe. In a war, with support and weapons. But 12 hunters against 1 human?" David checked his rifle's charge. Full power. He had enough shots for maybe 20 kills if he did not miss. Against Valkyrie hunters, who move faster than any human could track, and whose scales could stop most energy weapons, he would need every shot to count. "What happens if they take you?" he asked. Kira and Tomas exchanged a look. It was Luna who answered, her small voice trembling from her place against the wall. "They hurt us. For a long time. They make everyone watch. Then they kill us. David felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. It was a feeling he knew well. It was the feeling of a soldier preparing for battle. "That is not going to happen," he said. "Not while I breathe." He turned to Tomas. "Can you still fly?" Tomas stretched his wings experimentally and winced. "Barely. My injuries are not fully healed. But you can carry Luna?" "Yes, I can do that." "Good. There is a bunker under this cabin. I built it after the war in case things went bad again. It is hidden, reinforced, and stocked with supplies. You take Luna there, and you stay there until this is over. I will not hide while you fight for my family," Thomas growled. "You are injured. You cannot fight at full strength. And Luna needs protection. If we both die up here, what happens to her?" Tomas opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He looked at Luna, at her terrified eyes and shaking wings, and his resistance crumbled. "Where is this bunker?" David showed him the hidden entrance beneath the floor of the storage closet. It was a small hatch, covered by a rug and old boxes. Below was a ladder leading down into darkness. "There is food and water for a month. Air filtration. A communication unit that can reach the nearest human settlement." David grabbed Tomas's arm. "If I do not come back, you use that communication. You tell them what happened. You tell them that a human died protecting Valkyrie refugees. Make sure the world knows." Tomas nodded slowly. "I understand. Go, now, and keep her quiet. Hunters have good ears." Tomas gathered Luna in his arms. She clung to him, her small claws digging into his scales. Her eyes found David's face. "Grandfather," she said. It was the first time she had called him that. "Will you come back?" David's heart cracked, but his face remained steady. "I will try, little one. I will try very hard." Tomas disappeared down the ladder, carrying his daughter into the safety of the bunker. The hatch closed behind them with a heavy thud. David turned to Kira. "You should go with them." "No." Kira's voice was firm. "I will not leave you to fight alone. You are injured. Your wings are damaged." "My wings, yes. My claws are fine." She flexed her hands, and 10 razor-sharp claws caught the firelight. "I was not always a peaceful philosopher, David. Before I met Tomas, before I learned the old ways, I was a warrior. A good one." David studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Can you use a human weapon?" "Show me." He gave her his backup pistol, a smaller plasma gun that he kept hidden in the kitchen. He showed her how to aim, how to fire, how to reload. She learned quickly, her movements precise and efficient. "The hunters will come from the north," David said, looking at a rough map he had drawn of the area. "That is where their ships are landing. They will approach in a spread formation, trying to surround the cabin." "How do you know this?" "Because that is what I would do." He tapped the map. "We set up here, near the tree line. We hit them before they reach the cabin. Make them think there are more of us than there are." Kira nodded. "And when they realize the truth? Then we fall back to the cabin. Make them come through the door one at a time." He looked at her. "It is not a good plan, but it is the only plan we have. It is enough." Kira placed her clawed hand on his shoulder. "David, I need you to know something. Whatever happens tonight, my family owes you everything. You have shown us that humans can be kind. That mercy exists even in the hearts of warriors. That is worth more than you know." David shook his head. "Save the speeches for after we survive. There may not be an after. Let me say this now." Her golden eyes were fierce and bright. "You are not just our savior. You are our friend. And among my people, that is the highest honor we can give." David did not know what to say, so he said nothing. He simply nodded and checked his rifle one more time. Outside, the hunter ships had landed. The snow began to crunch under approaching feet. The battle was about to begin. The hunters came like shadows across the snow. They moved in perfect formation, 12 dark shapes spreading out to surround the cabin. Their scales were painted black for stealth, and their eyes glowed red in the moonlight. They made no sound as they walked. They were death itself, come to claim its victims. David watched them from behind a fallen tree at the edge of the forest. Kira crouched beside him, her pistol steady in her clawed hands. Her breathing was slow and controlled. Whatever fear she felt, she had buried it deep. "Wait for my signal," David whispered. "We hit the two on the left first. Then we move." Kira nodded. The hunters came closer. 50 meters. 40. 30. David aimed at the lead hunter, a massive male with scars covering half his face. He took a breath. Held it. Squeezed the trigger. The plasma bolt hit the hunter in the throat, burning through scales and flesh and bone. He fell without a sound. Before his body hit the snow, David had already fired twice more. 2 more hunters collapsed. Kira fired beside him, her shots less accurate but still deadly. She wounded 1 hunter in the shoulder and killed another with a lucky shot to the eye. For a moment, the hunters scattered in confusion. They had expected to find helpless refugees, not trained killers. That confusion cost them precious seconds. Then they recovered, and everything went wrong. The remaining hunters moved faster than David could track. They split into 2 groups, flanking their position from both sides. Plasma bolts and poison darts filled the air, shredding the tree they hid behind. "Move!" David grabbed Kira and pulled her toward the cabin. They ran through the snow, bullets and bolts flying past their heads. Something sharp grazed David's arm, drawing blood. But he did not slow down. They reached the cabin and crashed through the door. David immediately flipped the heavy wooden table and shoved it against the entrance. It would not hold for long, but every second counted. "How many left?" Kira gasped, pressing her back against the wall. 7, maybe 8. David reloaded his rifle. "They will try to come through the windows." As if hearing him, the first hunter crashed through the east window. Glass exploded inward, and a black-scaled warrior landed in the middle of the room. He was fast, impossibly fast, his claws already slashing toward David's throat. David ducked under the attack and shoved, his rifle against the hunter's chest. He pulled the trigger 3 times. The hunter staggered back and fell. Another hunter came through the west window. Kira met him with a scream of fury, her claws tearing at his face. They fought like animals, biting and clawing, rolling across the floor. David could not get a clear shot. 2 more hunters broke down the door, shoving the table aside like it was made of paper. David shot one in the head and turned to face the other. The hunter tackled him, driving him to the ground. Claws raked across his chest, cutting through his shirt and skin. David grabbed the hunter's throat and squeezed. His human strength was nothing compared to Volcari muscle, but he did not need to overpower the creature. He just needed to buy time. His hand found the knife at his belt and drove it upward. Through the soft scales under the hunter's jaw, the hunter died on top of him, blood pouring from the wound. David pushed the body aside and staggered to his feet. His vision was blurred, and he was losing blood fast. Across the room, Kira stood over 2 dead hunters, but she was hurt too. One of her wings hung at an unnatural angle, and deep cuts covered her arms. "That is 9, she said. 3 left. The remaining 3 hunters had stopped their assault. They stood outside the shattered windows, watching the carnage inside with cold, calculating eyes. "Impressive," the leader said. He was the largest of them, with golden bands around his horns marking him as a pack commander. "A human and a traitor. You have killed 9 of my hunters. I almost respect you." "Then leave," David said. "Tell your masters we are too much trouble." The leader laughed. It was an ugly sound, full of contempt. "You know I cannot do that." The traitors must die. It is the law. Your law, not mine. It does not matter whose law it is. You have 3 hunters still standing. You are wounded, outnumbered, and out of time. The leader's red eyes gleamed. Surrender the traitors, human, and I will let you live. You have fought well. There is no shame in accepting mercy. David looked at Kira. She shook her head slowly. She would rather die than surrender. He had known she would say that. No deal, David said. You want them. You come through me. The leader sighed. Very well. Kill them all. The 3 hunters rushed forward. David raised his rifle and fired, but his injured arm threw off his aim. He missed the first hunter, grazed the second, and did not even see the third until a clawed hand grabbed his throat. The hunter lifted David off the ground like he weighed nothing. His vision started to go dark as the claws tightened around his windpipe. Then, a small, pink blur shot out of nowhere. Luna. She had climbed out of the bunker. She had seen the fight. And when she saw the hunter killing David, something inside her snapped. She launched herself at the hunter's back, her tiny claws digging into his scales, her teeth biting at his neck. The hunter screamed in surprise and dropped David, spinning to grab the creature attacking him. It was the distraction they needed. Kira killed the hunter holding David with a single shot to the head. David grabbed his rifle and shot the second hunter through the chest. The leader turned to flee, but Tomas appeared in the doorway, his wings spread wide despite his injuries. He caught the leader in mid-run and dragged him down into the snow. They fought brutally, claws and teeth tearing at each other. David aimed his rifle, but could not get a clear shot. Then Tomas pinned the leader to the ground. His claws hovered over the hunter's throat. Wait! The leader gasped. I surrender. By the old laws, I claim mercy. Tomas hesitated. The old laws were sacred to the Volcari. Even traitors like him had been raised to respect them. Do not trust him, Kira warned. He will report back to the Dominion. I will not, the leader said quickly. I will tell them you escaped. I will tell them you are dead. Just let me live. Tomas looked at David. What do you think? David walked over to where the leader lay pinned in the snow. He looked down at the hunter who had come to murder a family, who had killed 9 of his own kind in the attempt, who had tried to strangle David with his bare hands. Do you know what mercy is? David asked. The leader stared at him. It is sparing the defeated. No. David shook his head. Mercy is not about sparing the defeated. Mercy is about choosing kindness when cruelty would be easier. It is about being human, even when others are not. He looked at Tomas. Let him go. What? Kira stepped forward. David, he will let him go. And give him a message for his masters. Tomas slowly released the leader. The hunter rose to his feet, his eyes darting between the 3 of them. Tell the Dominion that these traitors are under my protection, David said. Tell them that if they send more hunters, I will kill them too. And tell them that humans are not what they think we are. We are not brutal savages. We are people who choose mercy, even for those who do not deserve it. The leader stared at him for a long moment. Then, without a word, he turned and ran into the forest. Kira watched him go. He will bring more hunters. Maybe, David said. But by then, we will be ready. And we will not be alone. 3 months later, a ship from the Galactic Council landed near David's rebuilt cabin. The war was over, but tensions between humans and Volcari remained high. When the Council received a message from a human veteran offering to host Volcari refugees in a cultural exchange program, they had to investigate. What they found shocked them. Luna spoke perfect English. She wore David's dog tags around her neck like precious treasure. She called him grandfather in both languages and followed him everywhere he went. Tomas and David hunted together every morning. They had developed their own sign language for tracking prey, A mix of human gestures and Volcari claw signals. Kira had started teaching David the old Volcari philosophies. In return, he taught her human history, the good parts and the bad parts, hiding nothing. When the council representative asked David why he had risked everything for aliens he had every reason to hate, his answer was recorded and broadcast across 12 star systems. Because mercy is not weakness, he said. It is the hardest thing in the universe. It is choosing to be kind when every part of you wants to be cruel. It is looking at your enemy and seeing a person instead of a monster. He paused, watching Luna chase a butterfly through the Montana meadow. Humanity does not win by being the strongest. We win by being the ones who choose love when hate would be easier, who choose hope when despair makes more sense, who choose to build instead of destroy. He looked at the representative, his eyes steady and clear. That is what makes us human. Not our weapons or our technology or our strength, but our capacity for compassion, our ability to change, our refusal to let hate define us. The representative had no response, but across the galaxy, millions of beings watched the broadcast. They saw a human veteran standing with a Valkyrie family. They saw a child wearing dog tags around her neck. They saw two species who had fought a bitter war learning to live as a single family. And they understood, perhaps for the first time, that humanity's greatest weapon was not their military might, it was their heart. In the years that followed, David's cabin became a symbol of hope. Hundreds of refugees from both species came to visit.